what the Tadpole Press 100-word writing contest is all about.
So it's telling a complete, compelling story in 100 words or less.
I will never even be able to enter that contest because it'll take me 100 words just to introduce whatever I'm writing.
We've had winners really young as 9 or 10 in our announced group of winners.
My guest today is Amber Byers. Amber is an award-winning author, editor, writing coach, and speaker. She's the founder and CEO of Tadpole Press and holds a BA in English from the University of Washington and a JD in Law from the University of Arizona. She's proud to be a member of the Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Chippewa Indians in Michigan. Amber's Indian name actually translates to friend who walks with spirits.
Right now, the traditional publishing is so narrowly focused on books that are similar to previous books because they need to be financially sustainable. And when you hear different voices, when you get different perspectives, that's part of diversifying literature and encouraging people. You get to tell your story. You get to tell what excites you. You don't have to make it as close to the most recent successful thing that's out there. And that excites me. That's what drives me because I want to hear those other stories. You know, some writing contests, maybe you find online, you enter your piece, you don't hear anything until months later, you go back and see on the website who's selected as a winner. Our goal is to make it accessible and fun and inclusive. And so I realized as a writer, I need community around me. As an entrepreneur, I really need community around me. So how can I build that into my contest?
Welcome to Compassiviste Dialogues. I'm your host, Ali Horiat. My goal in this program is to educate our audience about various global issues and how we can help. My guest today is Amber Byers, founder of Tadpole Press. Amber is an award-winning author, editor, writing coach, and speaker. She's the founder and CEO of Tadpole Press and holds a BA in English from the University of Washington and a JD in Law from the University of Arizona. She's proud to be a member of the Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Chippewa Indians in Michigan. Amber's Indian name actually translates to friend who walks with spirits. This is something I learned in our last episode together, and it's kind of stuck with me because I like that name a lot better than Amber. And we're here to talk about today the Tadpole Press and Compassiviste Publishing collaboration that we're doing. So welcome back, Amber, and I'm glad to have you here. I'm glad we're collaborating. And I'm going to start with, I guess, you introducing to the audience what the Tadpole Press 100-word writing contest is all about.
You bet. Thank you so much for having me again, Ali. Thanks for the beautiful introduction. It's fantastic to see you again. It's fantastic to have this partnership with you. So the Tadpole Press 100-word writing contest is very, very short, as the title suggests. It's telling a complete, compelling story in 100 words or less. And that includes a title if you want to put one on there. Some writers do, some writers don't. And it's an international writing contest. It's all ages. And it's really built around the themes of celebrating creativity and celebrating community. So that's something that's been important to me, I realized, in my career. And I've just tried to make it a place where, you know, some writing contests, maybe you find online, you enter your piece, you don't hear anything until months later, you go back and see on the website who's selected as a winner. And so we do take several months to announce the winners because it's offered twice a year, every April 30th and November 30th. But in the meantime, we try to build in little community building pieces. So about once a month, we offer community write-ins, which is a chance for writers all around the world to come together for a very short 30-minute online session that has a chance to meet the judges, see them face to face, do some writing activities or maybe a writing prompt, have some quiet writing time in there. So we all get to actually practice our craft and just see other fellow writers and build up that sense of community. And then, of course, our big event after the contest ends is coming together for an hour-long celebration of words. That's a free event open to the public online. And it's one where we announce the winners, but two, where we also celebrate different people and, celebrate everybody who's in our community, but give different people who've entered a chance to read their entry, kind of like an open mic. And it's tricky because a lot of people want to hear who is selected for the prizes at the top. And of course, we share that information. But, our goal is to make it accessible and fun and inclusive, because that is only a small group who is at the very, very top. So, whether it's highlighting some of our youngest writers who are 5 or 6, or highlighting some really phenomenal pieces that, it's stiff competition. So there's some beautiful pieces deep down that are sad to not, award a specific prize to. So that's a general gist of what we do.
Okay. And I'm going to be the first to admit that I will never even be able to enter that contest, because it'll take me 100 words just to introduce whatever I'm writing.
Spoken like a true writer.
Seriously, though, because I know, Joanna, she's Compassiviste Publishing's director. I normally write stuff and send it to her first, and it comes back with a serious weight loss program. She chucks away so much of it, but then it looks so much better too when she does.
Yeah.
So, that's what I always say. I say, I go in with, 200 pages of writing. I come out with maybe 125. But the 125 is clear, legible, and people connect to it because, it's fast. It gets places.
Yes.
So, 100-word story for me would be, I'd get scared. That's talent, right? When people actually give you 100 words and it tells a whole story.
Yes. When I write these tiny pieces, because this is a genre that I love writing in, whether it's poetry or microfiction, my first draft is usually 500 to 600 words. And I look at it and think, it's perfect. How can I cut that down? There's no way. And then I slowly start chipping away at some of the details. And it's like a sculpture coming to life through marble, where you realize, oh, I didn't need that entire descriptive chunk to flush out the backstory, or I can summarize this in this little phrase. And it's amazing. I do keep the larger version because it's easier to cut it down when I know I can go back and look at it. But 9 times out of 10, I love the smaller version more. And it's so interesting to me because it feels like such a complete story at the beginning. But I also, as you were talking, I remembered, so we tried something new this year because, in the interest of just celebrating and that community piece, we sent out a poll at the beginning of this year to everybody on our email list. And we're always looking for new ways to improve. And one of the pieces of feedback we got was, we want more opportunities, more chances to enter, more chances to win. And so, some people were like, do your contest every month. And just knowing from the back end, I was like, oof, there's too much behind the scenes between getting our special guest judges and updating the websites and just all of the administrative stuff. I was like, that's not something we can take on, but we could add on So you're going to freak out for this, Sally, if the 100 words seems hard. At our community write-ins, for people who sign up for those, we now also offer a mini moon contest that's 10 words or less. So this is like nanofiction.
Yes, okay. This is where it becomes impossible. You know what? This is where a lot of lawyers will win, because I have lawyer friends just like you, and you guys write in short, like you will write a whole situation in 2 sentences, in the brief and all those things. I mean, when you apply for example, residencies, or, you're moving, you're migrating and stuff, and you have an attorney that's helping you, and they're like, why are you moving to this country? Send me a paragraph about that. And I say, a paragraph? No, like, that's a book. Why I'm moving. Let me tell you, this is why, and all the things. And then like, no, I'll, and then they make it into this short form of like 5 sentences. And I'm like, okay, if it works, but I really want to say the whole story, and I'm always like amazed at how like they shrink things into these tiny spaces and present them somehow. And it works. So 10 words or less. Yeah. I don't know.
Do you want to hear an example?
Yes, that's what I was going to say. I want to read an example of 10 words or less.
You bet. So because these are such short pieces, and because people want to, just have more without waiting for the entire contest to end, we've already selected the winners of the first Mini Moon contest for our April contest, which this interview will come out probably at some point leading up to our November contest. So you'll have to check our website. But these short little pieces, we have selected a few winners. And the first one that we did, our inaugural Moon, was, let me find it. This was from Jennifer Colwell from the United States. And you know what cracks me up about this one is Jennifer actually included a title. And I was like, who does that? You have 10 words to write a whole story. And like I said, the title is included. There were maybe 2 people or 3 people who put a title to their piece, and it cracked me up, but it's done so well. Okay, so the title is Minefield.
Okay.
I howl as shards pierce my soul. Damn Legos. And soul is spelled SOLE, like the sole of your foot. But when you read it out loud, you don't know if it's SOUL or, that's
until
what probably
the word Legos comes in.
Exactly.
And then you remember the title Minefield, and you put all of that together, and you're like, here's a mom trying to maneuver her way in the living room carpet, and
which is like a battlefield sometimes, because those Legos are sharp little.
I know. and I'm just imagining the whole house and the room and her and everything. And so there you go, a story, right? It's
amazing to me how much you can expand. It's like, that's what I love about microfiction or nanofiction, is that there's that ability you have to condense. But then in doing so, the words that are left, how do you expand? It's that interesting process of shrinking and growing at the same time. It's incredible.
A good story. That's a nice one, because like you can do so much with that in your brain, so to speak. Yeah. Because like it could be that's where the creativity comes in for me, because I could imagine a sentence like, I went to the park and met a happy squirrel. But it doesn't really like put you in all those moods and emotions that feeling yourself stepping on a Lego piece, imagining the household, imagining the minefield chaos, and maybe a dog barking as you're like, oh my God, my foot, and and all these things happening. Like one person can see it that way, another person can see another way, and there's so many ways of doing that. Whereas the sentence I just gave is kind of very like that. So to take that and then to do something with it to make it exciting is where the creative, that's amazing.
It's tricky. And to be honest, as a writer, I haven't played around with such tiny pieces before in my own writing. So I'll probably have to explore that a little bit, because the shortest I've usually done is 100 words. And I love that. I love that genre. I love that word count.
I'll tell you something. I did something like that. This is off topic, but I did something like that with poetry because I've read a lot of the haiku poetry, which is kind of like just 3 short lines and it's specific syllable count and everything else. And at first, when I used to read them, I used to really like them because they allowed me to imagine the setting because it's always about nature. And then I thought to myself, hey, you know what? I can do this because I've traveled extensively and I remember so many little moments that are kind of engraved in my memory. And I want to bring those and place them there. So I went through all the pictures in my phone and all the memories in my mind. And I said, what do I remember about this? Where did I go, first of all? And I jotted down all the cities. And then I selected the ones that I wanted. And I said, what do I remember from the nature specifically? And I said, I'm going to connect an animal with the space and, the idea of it, the plot or what I saw or what I experienced. And then I started thinking environmentally, it really connected with me because some of these animals actually don't exist there anymore in the places that I was in my childhood. And I remember them as such in those forests or in those deserts and whatnot. And some of those forests altogether don't exist now. And so I was like, wow, I could be writing about things in the moment through my life that are history now.
Wow.
And it's crazy. So I did. I sat there and I wrote a lot of them, and Joanna compiled them and made a book out of it. But it really goes to show that you don't need to write War and Peace to tell a story. You could. It's a different type of thing, but the short form also is something that is kind of picking up in today's world and pace as well. I mean, younger people are getting used to having to fit their thoughts and sometimes very deep thoughts on platforms like X and Instagram and stuff, where you get a certain character count to be able to really say what you want to say or make a statement. And you sometimes don't have that space to respond with a novel, right? And even if you did, it wouldn't get any real attention because people are just reading the quick form. And you notice a lot of people are managing to really be so creative in that one sentence response that speaks volumes, right? And I think that kind of creativity, whether fiction or nonfiction, is itself a genius on its own that people are not really crediting people for. Because again, the minefield sentence is a story, is a book, is a whole event, is a whole scene, right? So love it. I love,
and it's
people
so
who have that
relatable.
talent. Yes.
You can feel that piercing.
Exactly. Yeah.
You're like,
that's what I was saying. I imagined the dog in the room and the carpeting and the coffee table that your knee bangs into as you're, all these things. I went through the whole thing all the way to the kitchen counter where I'm holding on to the counter going, ow. So you see, everybody can go in their own direction in that. Another person can see it in a completely different setting. But that's really the beauty of storytelling and creativity. And I love it. I love that. Now, what inspired you to do this? Not just, and not technically, not about why 100 words, why 10 words, none of that. But what inspired you to think of, I'm going to connect writing with community and kind of do something that can reestablish or regroup people and bring them together again through art? because at the end of the day, writing is art. I mean, it's not a class where people are sitting together and painting together, but they're writing together. They're telling stories together. It's another form of art. So how did all this kind of happen for you?
Oh, I love that question. Yeah, I just know by my nature, I'm a very collaborative person. And I've known that for a long time. And it was only in the last few years that I also realized, so, this has been my career of being an artist and an entrepreneur for, almost, I think it was 2016, so 9 years or so.
Yeah,
and
decade.
yeah, coming up on a decade. Yeah. And that was a first point in my career where I was working on my own, and I realized there is something in my own energy, and I could watch it. Like if you could plot it on a graph, you could tell when I was in contact with other people, because the energy and the momentum and the productivity just shot up, and you could tell when it had been too long and my energy would be plummeting. And I realized this as I was working with various people, whether it was getting together with other writers and writers groups or critique groups, or I specifically had one marketing manager I brought on who it was her idea to do these community write-ins, and just the ability of ideas to bounce off of people. Also, I'm a pretty big extrovert in terms of processing. So if I have somebody to talk things out with, it gets me more energized. And when I'm more energized, then I have more ideas coming and I'm more excited and more productive. And if it's just me for too long, it doesn't matter what the task is. It's going to take me 3 times as long just because my energy starts to sag. And so I realized, as a writer, I need community around me. As an entrepreneur, I really need community around me. So how can I build that into my contest? And then what's fabulous is I just have also been reaching out to people. That's how we made the connection. I heard you on somebody else's podcast, sent you an email of thanks just for being you and, sharing incredible ideas. And you wrote back, and now Compassiviste is partnering with Tadpole Press to, offer really generous prizes of publishing and assessments to some of our writers. And that's the kind of energy, that's the kind of collaboration where we both bring each other up. And that's kind of why that whole spirit has come into my business.
And I'm glad you mentioned all of that, because in the shift of mindset recently, maybe 100, 150 years now, there's been this real shift, especially from the United States or in the United States, or happening or originating there, of the individual, the me, the I, the capitalist I, right? Where, I have to succeed. I have to be better than others. I have to compete and all those things. And I speak with people and I see that's not what they want. They don't want the I. They don't want the me succeeding, me, buying out my neighbors and having a mansion and everybody else is in a small home. They don't want that. They want their whole community to grow with them, right? If it's a matter of growth of any kind, they want, generally people get so excited when, say, they're pregnant at the same time and they're best friends or something. Why? It's not a matter of just like being identical or buying the same dresses. No, it's a matter of now there's continuity in our community, in that collective, because we're together, our kids are going to be together, and it just flows. It's that flow that people are looking for all the time in the connections. And so when you say that and you act on it and you say, you know what, I don't want to be the best-selling author who's on her own on this pedestal, and I go on a retreat by myself in the middle of nowhere and I write and my ideas come to me and I put out another bestseller and I make another $1 million and that's my life. You're saying no, I don't want any of that. What I want to do is I want to have 1 million people around that I can, build a community with and celebrate with, and kind of celebrate everybody's writing and everybody's experiences and stories, and kind of have that campfire, which goes back to your roots, because that's that's the community kind of base in the United States. I mean, when you look back at the most community inspired and collected people, is generally, all of the indigenous tribes, and even when you think back to that, I mean, even when the Europeans came, they did the same thing. They started to kind of come into these little groups that became communities, that became little villages, that became cities. And then they even had war with each other in those cities because they were collectives, right? I mean, the South, the North, and all those things. So everybody's looking for community. But what impresses me about what you're doing, and why I kind of wanted to be a part of what you're doing, and I brought Compassiviste to you and said, hey, Joanna, everybody, let's see what we can do here together, is because you're doing it the positive way. Even in your community building, you're not building a community to capitalize. Because a lot of times we do that, right? A lot of times we say, hey, that's what a hedge fund is. Let's pool our money so we have more power as a collective. But what do we need more power for? Because we're going to take over. We're not going to do better. We're not going to spread more, right? Where you're saying is, no, let's all come together, not so we can be a bigger publishing house so we can outsell our competitor. No, let's come together so that we can share, we can love, we can tell stories, we can have a good time, right? Together, and really build on that emotion and on that philosophy, and let it kind of go into the rest of what we do. Because I think when people meet in these groups and they become friends and they speak with each other and they meet each other, it could develop and grow into more solid connections. And the more we have these solid connections in our lives, and tangible connections, the more we become compassionate, the more we feel like we need to act by and on empathy. And that's really why I'm here. It could be writing, it could be music, it could be any form of expression. I'll always go there and support however I can, and collaborate however I can, because I think those are the, binding pieces to our capacity to live in harmony. If we have those, we're happy. If we don't have those, we're always going to just be in a destructive relationship with each other. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for, it's a lot bigger than just 100. When you say, Amber's the person who started the 10-word contest. Cool. Okay. The 10 words are nice. Some of them are really cool, but it really stops there. But when you think really deeply about what is trying to be accomplished here through what she's thinking about, 100-word contest, 10-word contest, bringing people together, allowing them to exercise their arts practice, use their crafts for storytelling, for bringing more education to people through those stories. It really makes it all kind of come together. Now,
yes,
that's my version. Now, what's your version of why it matters? Why does Tadpole Presses? Somebody asked you, why do you do this? Why do you wake up in the morning and put your time into this? Because this is a legitimate question. You have a law degree. Why are you not sitting in some fancy office, charging fancy hours, doing that? Why are you doing this? What would you say?
Oh yeah, that is a whole story in and of itself. But the short answer is, the law did not fit me. It's premised, for those of you who don't know, on the adversarial system, which means two parties, two people, two companies, whatever, fighting. One loses, one wins. Maybe you settle it in mediation. But the backdrop is we're opposites. We're on different sides. And I love what you were saying about the power of the collective, and especially the contrast between the power of the top 1% and that hit with me really hard, in the last few years, where I realized, so the reason I chose, like the technical reason I started this contest of 100 words, was because I had heard about another microfiction contest run out of Spain. It's a Cesar Diego Serrano microfiction contest. And there's maybe, I think, 4 winners. The first one gets $20,000. The next 3 get like 1,000 or 2,000 or something. I'd have to double check, but it is massive. I mean, there's probably 40 or 50,000 entries from around the world, probably almost 200 countries. And so that was my one experience into microfiction. And so when I created the contest, I took the funds that I had and I said, okay, we're going to start with $1,000 for the first prize. And in the back of my mind, I was thinking, the more money that I can make through this venture, the more I'm going to increase that first prize, because I had built it off of this idea. One person gets 20,000 and everybody loves it. Everybody flocks to it and tries to be that one person. And right now the top prize is $2,000. And again, when I'm sending out these polls, this, for the second time, I would ask people in a poll, would you rather increase the prize money for the first place prize or make it more prize monies, more prizes offered? And resoundingly, I was surprised, but both times, the vast majority of people wanted to extend the number of prizes, even if that was only $100 to 10 more people. And so we're actually going to switch back to that with the November contest and make it more of a power of the collective. Mm-hmm. So the top prize will go back to $1,000. Well, we still are going to have the beautiful packages from Compassiviste and from Tadpole, but we're also just going to try to build out instead of building up. So the more successful we get, and also that usually means the more people that are coming to us, it gives us the opportunity and the ability to build out. And so it's always a question of how can we highlight more people? Because what it comes down to is, yes, this is my income. And yes, this is, it needs to be sustainable for me to keep doing it. Mm-hmm. But the huge goal, why I wake up, why I'm excited for it, why this is my passion, is because when you highlight more voices, that's part of diversifying literature. And right now, the traditional publishing is so narrowly focused on books that are similar to previous books because they need to be financially sustainable because it costs so much money. And when you get out of that system and you say, let's tell stories that haven't been heard before. Let's tell stories. We've had winners really young, as young as 9 or 10 in our announced group of winners. And when you hear different voices, when you get different perspectives, that's part of diversifying literature. Mm-hmm. And encouraging people. You get to tell your story. You get to tell what excites you. You don't have to make it as close to the most recent successful thing that's out there. Mm-hmm. And that excites me. That's what drives me, because I want to hear those other stories. And maybe it's a little selfish because I have read so much. And when you've read as much as I have, you can see some of the similar plot lines going through. And it's so much more exciting and interesting for me when something you're reading, you're like, oh, I know where this is going. And then it doesn't. It takes a turn, or it shows you something unexpected, and it makes you stop and kind of pull out of that and be like, whoa, did you see what just happened? That's fun. Mm-hmm. When people talk about diversifying literature, I want them to know it's because it's exciting. It's because there's something new and something powerful and fun and fresh. And that's why I love it. That's really what it all comes down to.
And the power of the collective, like you said, I mean, giving the power to the right collectives, because
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned, the top publishing houses. And the thing
Mm-hmm.
is, in today's age where you don't need to have a good book or a good story to sell a lot of books, because the sales really depends on your social media following, on your celebrity status, and many other things. So, not to point at someone, but if, for example, people like, the Obamas write a book, they probably could literally have a blank book, like 300 pages of blank sheet with a title and their author's name, and bookstores will still carry it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Instant.
not, and it's not to say they don't write well, or they don't. No, it's nothing like that. I'm just saying it will just sell not because of the book, because of the content, because of the stories. Even if they're good storytellers, they could still get away with that. You and I won't. You and I need to come up with the masterpiece of a century for an agency to be like, should we even dare? Because look, Harry Potter was that situation. Nobody wanted to touch that. It is the most selling book ever, billionaire status. Like, there was not much more success you could ask for from a publishing house perspective. But like you said, nobody was touching it. Dozens of people passed on it because it's different. We're not looking for that right now. We're looking for adult romance, for example, right? That's what we're looking for. This doesn't fall in that genre. That's where the money's going. I'm going to go look for the next person who does that. And it destroys literature, because if you look back at the breadth of literature, not just English, I mean, all languages, you notice there were so many different varieties of people's ways of expressing themselves through writing. And there's so many different types of things happening. And even within the same authors, like you find a masterpiece comedy, and then the same person would have a play that's a tragedy. And they dared to do that because they weren't worried about the finances, about the capitalism of it, so to speak. They were free to do that. Today, in most genres, I mean, imagine music, just for people to relate to this in every space. Imagine you are I don't know, Metallica or Guns N' Roses in the 80s. And you like, you know what, I'm going to try my hand at rap.
Yeah.
What? No, you can't. You're not even allowed to, because this is what you do. This is your specialization. This is where we invested in you and we make money off of you. You cannot destroy a working system. I don't care if you have artistic aspirations. And the same thing's happening with books, right? With literature, with storytelling. So what you're doing is also very pioneering in a sense of saying, let's tell our stories the way we want to tell them, freely, and to come from every space that you want to, as long as it fits the word count. That's really it.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be about space. It doesn't have to be about have an angle of science fiction. It doesn't have to be about family issues. No, as long as it fits 10 words or 100 words or whatever the category is, that's where we want you to be. Be free beyond that, and that's really admirable.
Thank you.
It speaks to shared values. I'm here rooting for all of this and happy about it, because it's what just like yourself, I went through a lot of changes, and the short story of that is I came up with Compassiviste Publishing exactly for that purpose. I said, there are so many people in the world who have amazing stories, especially when you travel and meet people around the world and you're not in the tourist hotspot, but you're really among the people, and you see their celebrations, their griefs, and whatever they're going through, and how their customs and traditions and communities function. You learn so much, and they're so beautiful. The stories, you just want to sit there and listen to them forever. And I think when Compassiviste Publishing started, for me, I wanted to tell those stories. I wanted to bring people on who have different stories, who have different kind of things that they can bring to the table that I haven't heard or people haven't heard. And I'm not scared to do that, just like yourself. We're very aligned in that way. We're not scared of saying, I think we should diversify. I think we should be, more accessible globally. I think we should not care if contestant comes in with 20 million followers and that's the winner, just because just because of the financial edge they bring to the corporation right now. Because I'll tell you, if I had access to A-list celebrities autobiography, which promises some very saucy details, who's going to pass that up? Nobody. It may be poor content, but nobody's passing that up because the sales are going to skyrocket. Whereas somebody may come to you and say, let me tell you about the story of how the Indigenous people in Australia transfer knowledge from one generation to another through singing and storytelling, but they don't write it. They don't have one Bible. But nothing's changed. The same story is passed on for over 300 years that we know of. Yet there's no one written word. Let somebody tell you that story and how it's done in a book. Not a lot of big publishing houses will want it, but a lot of people will want to read it. They just can't find it, right? And I think what you're doing is allowing those people to start finding the authors who are entering these contests, who then start getting picked up, like the indie music scene. They start getting picked up from these places that aren't holding the big concerts and the big football stadiums and stuff. But there are places where people go to find real storytelling, to find real people writing about their life experiences. So there's a lot of alignment between us.
Yeah, agreed. Now, your background is in finance, and
Yes.
I know you got to the point where it just burned you out and you said, I have to get rid of everything and just refocus. And I'm curious, did you ever, before you made that decision, did you ever think, okay, this is not fulfilling me personally? Like, you can buy your own, pay off your car, pay off your house, and then you're like, okay, now what? But did you ever think of taking that money and using it for the collective? As I got in my very first podcast I was interviewed on, one of the questions was this random pop-up question of, if you had $10 million, what would you do? And I was like, that's like beyond my main financial goal, which is pay off my student loans from law school and, build savings, maybe buy a house. I don't know. Beyond what you can do personally. And I thought I would buy conservation easements and I would make them, airtight, where, especially in Colorado, there's so much oil and gas. And I would just, prevent the underground mineral rights from being bought out to, be sold for fracking, and build it as a community space. Like all those huge national open spaces, like when you have that kind of money, you hear of like billionaires who buy a private island, but just for themselves. And I wonder, did you ever evaluate, is there something I can do with this money for the collective? Or was it just so toxic that in your life you needed to be free from it in order to refocus on what really mattered?
I have a two-part answer. The first part is, yes, it was toxic. But the second part is this is a word I can't say, the toxicity. Yes.
Toxicity?
Of it was worse. And that is why I gave it away instead of doing something with it myself. And this is how it happened. When I first realized I don't want to do this anymore, I want to refocus. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was a series. I think the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, slapped me so many times across the face saying, Ali, wake up. And I didn't. And at the end, this force said, I still love you. So I'm not going to just let you drown yourself in wealth and go down some dark route. I'm going to save you whether you like it or not. So many events happened that really opened my eyes. And when those events happened, I said, okay, I'm going to shift gears. I'm going to do good with this money. And like you said, I had ideas, buy conservation land, do this and that, whatever. But what I noticed is the same thing that I notice in a lot of people today is when you tell them, what would you do with $100 million? They will quickly give you answers. They know what they're going to do with the money. And that's egotistic because you're not really thinking of what the grandest public good of this money can be beyond your knowledge and your ideology, and how far this can go to make real change, whether community or globally, right? So I thought to myself, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do all these things. And I was being very kind of like dictatorship style, right, with it, because I know I made all this money. Who are you to tell me, right? Like, have you ever made $1 million? No, then, please sit down. So that's the attitude when you have that much money, you dictate everywhere. And people listen because we value each other financially. So when we say Mr. or Miss or Mrs. so-and-so is, walking in and their net worth is $7 billion, everybody rises. It's kind of like when the judge comes into the courtroom, right? Why? Why should everybody rise? Because of the value of this person. But if you say this person, Mother Teresa walked into the room, many people, they're not impressed because she's not wearing a Rolex. She doesn't have what we value today. So some people will, and some people not really. It's not that important. And so in that assessment of myself, I realized my addiction to money and control through money was the same as, somebody being addicted to heroin. It was no different because I functioned in the same way. And in my field, if you know any people in what I was doing specifically, it becomes, that's where you see Wolf of Wall Street and these kind of characters where people are really on edge all day because you're dealing with billions of dollars that could go sour in one split second, right? And you see someone jump out of Wall Street window to their death. Those are the scenes. So a lot of those people have a lot of vices. I was the one taking a lot of my friends to rehab, supporting them, sitting with the doctors and saying, what do we do so Charlie doesn't die, And then when I saw myself in the same situation, I said, okay, maybe I'm not an alcoholic. Maybe I'm not addicted to heroin, but I am addicted to money. So if I continue down this stream, this money is not going to do any good. What's going to end up happening is I'm going to abuse it for my own self-aggrandizement. So you're going to see a hospital with the name Ali Horiat on its wing, Cardiac Center of Ali or something. And that's my donation, right? Yeah, but that's me. It's ego. It's not really for I care about any cardiac issues. So, and a lot of people do that. You notice in every city, major hospitals have a family name somewhere on the wall. And when you think about it, well, you know what? That's because you just bought the healthcare system with that one donation for your entire family. As soon as your child says, "Oh, my pinky hurts," there's 3 doctors at the door. Why? Because you made that donation. And it's worth it for rich people, right? It's very worth it. So that's the path I was going.
Still not the collective.
Yes, it was never the collective. It was always about me, and it was always about I was the one who allowed you guys to eat. I was the one who saved you. I was the one who opened the soup kitchen so you bums can eat. That's the mentality. You're not a collective. It's like this. You're speaking down to people. You're telling them they're worthless, and I'm saving you. I'm the Messiah here. And all this ego builds worse. I mean, at that point, I wish I wasn't back in my office because there was less toxic thoughts in the office than there is when you become a philanthropic person, And so I said, no, I can't do this because if I do this, it's a disaster. It's exactly where I was, just in another industry. It's like, closing your ice cream shop and opening a burger store. It's no different. You're still in the same food industry, still in the restaurant, same thing. You just change your one product. No, I can't do this. That's when I decided to give it all away. I gave it all away to mental health. And the reason I did that is I thought it's a place where there are stats in North America that state, and these are true stats, and I'm going to even reduce the numbers a little because people can check those, but over 90% of our reasons to approach a doctor or anything in medicine are related to mental health and not physical health today. In the early 1900s, over 90% were physical. So we swapped those two things, yet our systems are still designed for the physical. You go into a hospital and there's 9 floors of, physical surgery rooms and all these things. And then there's one wing, which is a quarter of a floor, that deals with mental health. And there's 2 doctors there. Yeah. And it's never kind of covered under any universal system or insurance plans and stuff like that, unless you're like really buying the full package there. Even then, it's not very comprehensible. So, and most of our problems are because of not recognizing, appreciating, and relating to mental health. And so I wanted to kind of give it to a place that I thought has the capacity to do good with this. And that was my being part of the collective. That was me saying, I know I don't know what to do with this. I know I made all this money. Yes, I did. And, people say, oh, you made so much money. You're wealthy. You're God. No, let's put all that aside. I want nothing to do with it. I want to start over. But I want to at least give all that energy to a place that will make something more positive happen. Right? Because I know I can't do it. And that is a question, an answer I'm waiting for people to be able to say. So when people go on shows or on TV or, news interviews or whatever, and it happens often, they ask if you had $100 million or if you were president of the United States, how would you fix the problems we have? And they automatically go into this auto response of, I would do this, this, this. They're ready for that question. They've been waiting their whole life for that question, right? It's never like, I don't know, actually, because who knows? We need to come together and see how we can do this, right? And so I fought myself so much in getting to a place where I could say, I don't know. And I'm going to delegate that power to somebody who seems like they know, or to an organization who seems like they know. And I hope that, they're going to do a lot better than I would have dictating my money around. So, really, in a nutshell, that was where the community concept started for me. And it happened exactly this shift from me being philanthropic to me choosing to give it up and move away really happened again, very much because of myself. It was not collective at all. I'll be very honest. It was because I realized my addiction. I realized I was sick in that way. And I realized that I need to separate to be able to regroup and become part of a collective. Because even if I had built a collective, it would have been built on money. It would have been built on hierarchy. It would have been built on, it's kind of like, imagine your prize now. And imagine somebody comes and says, Amber, I love what you're doing. I'm going to bring in $100,000 and we're going to make the prize $100,000 for first place. But then they'll say, you know what? I don't like your logo. I'm kind of feeling like we need a giraffe there. How much can you say no?
Right.
You're going to put that giraffe there because $100,000, right? That's how people think. And so generally people don't say no. So that was me. That was like me coming to you and saying, I'll give you $100,000. I want a giraffe in the logo. And I want my name somewhere embellished there. And I want to, whatever. And you always have to be like, yes, sir, to the point where the contest is done. To the point where Tadpole Press cannot recognize itself in the mirror. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to come into a space where you and I can communicate, can exchange ideas. When you sent me that email, it opened up space to communicate, and we started communicating. We have this lovely thing happening and growing. But if I had that kind of money and you emailed me, somebody from my office would have answered and dismissed your appreciation for what I said or your kindness. All of that would have been dismissed, and we would have went straight into, what are your numbers? How many writers do you have? How is this going to grow? Let's bring our financial audit in here, yada, yada, yada. And we would have invested into buying your idea. So it's very scary. It's very dangerous. It's very crippling to bring in the wrong kind of money into your organization. And that's what I've done. I've been very strategic about there are many organizations out there who flat out say that we don't allow billionaire money into our organization. We don't take billionaire funding and stuff like that. And I say, no, you know what? You're wrong about that too. And I'll tell you why. There are a lot of trust fund kids today. I've spoken to a few in their when I say kids, I'm an old man. So in their 20s and 30s, I just realized I'm so old when I say things like that. I'm referring to like 25-year-olds and I'm like, kids. No, young people, just slightly younger than me. They speak with me and they're like, you know what? I have this trust fund that's worth, $1 billion. Okay. But then I look at grandpa, on the walls of our homes, and I know what he did for this $1 billion to happen. I can't take this billion and continue that life. I just feel wrong about inheriting essentially blood money, right? I just feel wrong about that. So I don't want to be a part of this. I know I have this money. I know I have, it's mine, and I know all of these things. But even if I'm still greedy, I'm okay with $100 million. There's an extra $900 million here that I just don't want to touch because it's bad. And even though, in a Jesus model, you would give all of that to community, I appreciate a person who says, I understand this was acquired in an oppressive manner, and I understand a whole empire was built on oppression. And now when it's my turn to be that emperor, I'm willing to make as much amends as I can. I'm not going to give up my house because I grew up this way. I'll go crazy if I went and lived on the street, for example, and started over again. But I'm willing to give 90% of it up. And so a lot of the new inheritance of this generation and a lot of people who are self-made are recognizing these things. Not all of them, but there's quite a number who are recognizing. So I think alienating people who are extremely wealthy creates that, again, dichotomy and us them kind of thing that we are fighting for ourselves. I mean, I'm here, you're here, we're trying to fight for an inclusive, diversified community. Yet in our inclusivity, we're excluding someone who says, I'm a billionaire, or I own an oil rigging company, because we see that as bad. Whereas I say, no, let's actually focus on that person. Let's say you are welcome in this house. And when you come in and we hug, I want to also, in that embrace, explain to you why this oil rigging situation isn't really harmonious. And maybe you can see that as well. And maybe together we can grow and change, right? I mean, that's what the compassion is about. So I left that world of invest with your money or have power with your money. And I thought, what's a lot more powerful than money is a collective. Yeah. Because money, we had BLM just a few years ago in the United States. They didn't change one law in the United States, not one. You're a lawyer, you know that. Martin Luther King had no money, not even anything close to BLM. He changed laws. Yeah. And the reason he changed laws was not because a billionaire said, here's $1 billion, go and put all the billboards up on the, on the freeways and let's make change. No, he had people because he had substance. And I think when we build collectives with substance and we have good leadership and we have a proper vision, we get there because it's tangible talk. You can touch that talk. When you listen to some people speak, when you think to Gandhi, when you think to some people who made change, even the bad ones, I want to go as far as saying even people like Hitler, when you listen to them, they have such a clear vindication of what they're going to do, how they're going to mobilize the collective, and how they're going to achieve their goals. Even if it comes from a bad space, you need to focus on how this is possible and how we can use it for good, right? Because learning what an atom is eventually got us to the end of the Second World War in Japan and Hiroshima and all of that. But it also got us to a lot of good scientific discoveries. So it's just how we use it, right? And I keep telling people, focus on the collective, because if you have 100 million people who are vocal and together and strong and, single voiced about something, you're going to get that good happening. in the community. You're going to progress in the community. And so I want to be a part of the people. You can't be a part of the people controlling people with money or directing people with money or forcing people with money, because eventually you won't have enough money. And I think if we go back to history, sometimes, there are these parables. I mean, the story of teach people how to fish instead of giving them fish, because one day there'll be so many people who want fish, and there'll be so little people who can give fish, and there'll be so little fish in the water in that area anyways, that it'll all break down on you. It'll all break down. And that's why, for example, we're seeing homelessness mushroom in the United States, because we're tackling it not from a communal perspective, but from a perspective of, let's just at least feed them so they're alive and they don't die. Well, you're just prolonging the problem. You're feeding them, they're staying alive, and you're continuing the misery because you have no solution in mind. All these organizations who are dealing with poverty and homelessness in the developed world, never mind the developing world, in places like the US and Canada, you speak with them deeply and say, what's the end goal? What's your 3-year end goal? What's your exit? They don't have one. It's like a forever thing. I'm forever going to feed the homeless people in this area for as long as donations come. And I have a good marketing team who are assuring me that donations will continue to come. So this cycle, as long as these people have kids and more homeless people come here, I'm good because I get a salary and I feed. But because you're not part of the community, see what I mean? There's that dichotomy where they're the homeless and you're the Messiah. And so you never become a community. But when you do become a community, then you see the issues, you see the systemic issues, you see the problems, and you say, no. We're not going to spend the donations on buying hot dogs from Walmart and passing them on here for free. No, the problem is A, B, and C. We're going to tackle those problems. That's when you come up with an exit strategy within your community. That community, your community, come together, you make change.
I love that. And that's so honest too and beautiful. Thank you for sharing your reasons for why you couldn't work in that toxicity. And what's cool is probably most people who are listening to this already know Compassiviste Publishing is a nonprofit publishing house. And that's unusual in the world of publishing. One thing that I want to know more about, I've seen glimpses, is the work you do, because all of your sales from your anthologies or the books, or, all of it, you have all these arms as an octopus, and it's all funneled into these charities that are focused on social justice and environmental ethics. And so I'm curious to hear more about how you chose those, how you found those, and the work that they're doing. And if they're long-term partners, or if you kind of come in for a short period of time and then find somebody new, or I want to hear a little more about all that.
How I pick the partners is very simple. I look at people who are capable of putting the theory to practice and making change with the funding required. So it's the same thing as innovation. Somebody comes to you and says, look, there's this, I've created the light bulb. And you say, oh my God, look at this. It works. Like, you screw it in and the whole room is lit. Great. How do we get this to people? How do we put this all over the world? It needs this much money. Okay. Yeah, for sure. I'm in. Let's do it. Why? Because we see what's happening, right? So the first thing is, I need to see that you can make change with what you're proposing. But that's not enough. If you can prove that, then I need to see that this is replicable, because most of our social issues in the world today are connected to environmental issues anyways. And sometimes people don't understand this when I first say it, but if you notice, for example, poverty issues or migration issues or refugee issues growing around the world, it's because of environmental issues. I mean, when there's a drought in a place that's already poor, where are these people going to go? I mean, they either have to sit there and die, which the human body can't. It's kind of like hold your breath till you die. You can't do that. you physically can't. Your body will override your will, and you will have to breathe at some point before you die. It's just natural, right? Nature does not allow you to do that, your own nature. And so in the same way, for the vast majority, when they see that there's a drought and they have, a few days left and they're going to die, they're going to seek some kind of sustenance somewhere, right? So they're going to migrate. And so you notice a lot of the world is doing this. You notice a lot of the trafficking issues, for example, are in the same scope of things that are happening. You notice a lot of health issues are happening globally in the same ways because of, pollution and capitalism and things that come from essentially us wanting to make more money from selling an apple. And so these things are happening. They're the same around the world now. They're not really, a single space thing. Whereas there may be one or two little things that are different between, for example, the same issue in Mexico and France, but overall it's the same. So I look for a scalable model after I know it works. What we want to test is always the actual work that they're doing, and then close that and scale it. The long term is the scalability, just like any other product. I come from that world. That's what I used to do. We used to look at products that will, for example, Uber. Yeah, great idea. We're going to be on board. We're going to invest. That investment, that original, I'm coming in, is a tiny bit. Because no company at first requires, $200 million to get off the ground. At first, they require little seed money to even register themselves, right? And so you come in at that point, but you're not really coming in for that moment. You're coming in for the 10 years later that your stock is going to be worth an unfathomable number, right? And so I replicate this in the philanthropy world, so to speak, and in a way that we can also equate people. So I'll give you a quick example so this makes sense. We're working with the University of Sheffield in the UK, and they had started working on supporting refugees in a camp, Syrian refugees in a camp in Jordan. And that happened because one Syrian refugee ended up in the UK as a professor because he had studied and had the degrees and stuff. And he's Syrian, and he started telling other professors about the issues that happened in Syria. One thing led to another. Community, all the professors knowing him and said, we got to do something about this. He said, let's start helping. So they went all the way there to start helping. When they got there, they realized there's famine in a UN-run camp. It's like, how? This is the UN. What do you mean there's famine, right? And so one of the fathers of hydroponics, essentially, who is at that university, he said, I'm going to fix this. So he started using discarded mattresses as the beddings to kind of plant, food in there, tomatoes and other things. So people can now in the camp themselves, because they're all farmers. I mean, these are Syrians who are farmers, essentially, who are in the camp. Now, they know how to do this. You just need to teach them. And the tools were there, available. So when I got in, I said, this is great. This is really great. But the next step is we need to shift these people from the camp to land. So kind of like your conservation land idea, why don't we buy a land, give them the land, right? We raise the money, donations. We buy your land for £100,000, for example, dollars. And now they have few acres of land, and we bring some pre-built homes. We put it in for them. Now they're residents. Now they have papers. Now they're legally human, right? Versus refugee. And they can sell their product and from their co-op, and they can send their kids to school. They can start having community. And this community can blossom and grow, and it will eventually grow into a city or a village, and then there'll be roads, then internet will come, and all those things will happen. This is a model. Can it be replicated in Mexico? Yes. Can it be replicated in Calais? Yes. In Bangladesh? Yes, because it's the same issue everywhere, right? There's no transition for refugees from camp to back to normal life. The only transition is when the conflict ends in their country, they're allowed to go back. But their country already is 10, 12, 13, 15 years sometimes destroyed. I mean, there are children who are born in that camp. They can't go there and start over as if it was their country. They don't know that place. So We come in to do that. So the long term is replicating it and making it better. The short term is to show people that it worked. You gave me $10. I took it there. It worked. I show you that it worked. I come back. I say, now there are 35 other camps that we want to do this for. So 10 times 35, let's put in the 350 and actually make this happen and change the world. Now, take that on different levels of social issues, and we've tried to support causes and people and animals and the environment and our ecosystems in various ways that we can kind of approach this from a global perspective as opposed to specializing in one field. And the reason for that is also very simple. I think if we focus on feeding all the hungry people in the world, I mean, there's about 20,000 people daily who pass away from famine alone. And it's a huge number daily. When you think about, okay, let's save all of those, even if you have the genius to do that, what happens when climate change takes over? I mean, you're killing them and you and all the people you saved with you if you don't take that into account as well. But if you do take that into account as you're helping this cause, you're starting to kind of, fix the problem. So for me, the specialization factor of it is also the destabilizing factor, because here you are, for example, say you're a billionaire and you can just build homes for people, and you do that on deforestation. A few years later, a flood's going to come and take all those homes and all the money that you put in there and many of the people and the animals who you've placed there, and they're all going to die together. But there is a way of doing this without the deforestation, right? And that's what we got to focus on. So that's how it comes in. And the way that this works the best is, again, not micromanaging things and not thinking you know better, but to bring your ideas to the table like I do, and allowing people to share and to kind of lead and to proceed with what they do. I don't boss people in any of the spaces that I'm involved in, because I know that the people who've been doing this, who have come up with these ideas or who have done what they're doing, they know what they're doing. They just need support, the kind of support I can bring. And I know where I fit in that equation. So I place myself where I need to be to fit. So sometimes I need to be, the fourth wheel so the car rolls smoothly. I'll be the fourth wheel. Even though I know how to drive as well, even though I know how to be an exhaust system, I'll be the wheel because that's what it needs now. And if I can't, then I say, I don't know. But I'll never say, everybody step away. I used to race cars and everybody step aside and I'm going to do this and just crash because I never noticed there's no fourth wheel there.
Yeah.
And that's
such a great analogy. I love that analogy. And it also struck me as you were explaining it, you're bringing together people for support, but also based on the skills that each person has. And that's like tapping into the power of the collective. How do we not force one way onto everybody? But how do we look at, farming, whatever, coming together with each person's idea. And that to me, it also kind of ties into the diversifying literature. I know it's a different area, but it's listening to each person's voice instead of saying there's one right way to make a story. There's one right way to build a world or build a society or farm or whatever. It's tapping into all that vast, diverse knowledge that exists when you go out rather than up. I love that.
And I think that's freer doing it, right? Because even especially with writing, when I went to school, I remember one of my professors, I worked so hard on an essay, so hard. And those were the days where you handed them in paper and you stapled them. And so we come to the next class and the professor says, Ali, come here. And I went to the front of the class, and mind you, there's, dozens of people there. It's like, this isn't in the format that we write it. And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, because I didn't write the author's names and the references in the MLA correct like version and stuff like that. And I said, did you even read what I like? Are you serious?
Oh, no.
Are you serious right now? But then I realized this kind of structural, these systems, these archaic systems that we've created are meant to for efficiency. They're not meant for creativity. When we format stuff, I mean, Amazon will not upload your book unless it's in a certain format that they work with, and it's automated. So you automatically just get lost, if you don't have it. And if you have everything correct exactly how they want it, you automatically go in. And there are people who make a living off, formatting you to fit into that model. So
to get in line.
Right. And so that just shuts down your creativity, because maybe I wanted a live cover for my book. Now that we have the technology to have a moving cover on an ebook, I want to exercise that right. But I can't because Amazon sells over 90-something% of books. And if I can't sell my book on Amazon, nobody's seeing my book. So I have to let go of my creativity and say, okay, I'll go with the idle book. I don't want the tiger running through the forest. I'll just have a static tiger in the forest, because that's what Amazon allows me. And I think these are limitations we need to work beyond. And I think this is where the collective comes. If all the authors can just come together, we have the tech come together and say, just like we have Earth Day coming up, have the day where we're telling Amazon, we need more creativity with the trillions that you've made. We need you to invest in better platforms that allows for us to be more creative as artists.
Yeah.
Your platform is the same from the day you open till now, technically. You're not allowing anything more. Yet, you made your money off the backs of all these artists who brought in their expressions, who brought in their vulnerabilities, who brought in their stories.
Yeah.
That's what you built Amazon on. It was on books. Where is the community? It just gets lost in the money. It gets lost because now in the Amazon meetings, in the senior meetings, it's not about the books. It's not about the creativity. It's about numbers. It's about efficiency. It's about how do we stretch that 80 cents? It's all those things, because it compounds to billions.
That's such an interesting reminder too, because you're right. When I was switching from my career as an attorney to my career as a writer, I brought that mentality of efficiency because I came from the system of billable hours. You track your time down to the 0.1 of an hour, and the world of creativity, I realized it more mirrors nature. It's not really concerned with efficiency. It's concerned with producing beautiful leaves and producing beautiful flowers that the petals then fall off and, create this gorgeous blanket on the ground, but don't last. And then something new is born. And it was definitely a shift for me to let go of that structured billable system, because at first I was like, should I be tracking my time and how long? And I was like, oh my gosh, no. No, just let it go. And now I'm in this playful place with my own writing where I get to just it feels like a dance with a divine creative spirit, and it's so uniquely me. And I also realize that one size fits all and that focus on efficiency doesn't just exist in the law or finance or wherever. There are very much groups or places in the writing world as well that tell you it's time for you to get in line. And so when I talk about community, I always have a little caveat of be aware of stepping into the wrong community, because some people can sound really convincing. And if you're questioning yourself inside and somebody says, I know the way to make you a successful writer, I know how to get you to X, Y, or Z, you're like, oh, well, that sounds, I guess I'll try that.
I'll buy the course.
Yeah, exactly. And it's always, there's a little, your internal voice comes back though, and there's always that little pushback of, hold on, I have this idea from my own unique, it's just this dance with creativity for me. And so I kind of have to step back from what else is happening in writing circles even. And I realize that because I've entered a few different writing contests, which is fun for me as a writer, especially the short ones, because I get to practice my own writing style, but I also get to see what are other contests doing. And I realized after I entered two kind of back to back, I was like, oh, there is this mentality that exists that there's kind of this one way to do the writing competition circuit. And you're looking for one story and one angle and everything. Again, it's that falling in line piece. And so both as an entrepreneur and as an artist, I was like, I got to go spend some time with myself. And it's this balance. I realized it pretty quickly because I've been practicing that for years now. Whereas, maybe a decade ago, I would have battled back and forth internally. And now I'm like, I think I need to refocus and on just finding a quiet space for myself in my own writing and in my own, building a business for me is a creative process as an entrepreneur. So it's part of it too, is yes, you want the community, you want the collective, and also how is it a collective of different parts where you're not smoothing over everybody into one voice. I think that's the key for me.
And that's very important because it plays into how do you build the finances and structure to do that? Because at the end of the day, I always remind people, creativity, activism, the will and the want to change, the awakening, the spiritual imposition of all those things, they're all necessary to progress. However, in the world that we've created today, just like oxygen is necessary for breathing, money is necessary for sustenance. We don't live in a world where, we just walk and then, you and I say, we feel kind of hungry, and then we'll look around at the trees that there are. We're like, let's have apples today. We'll go sit by the apple tree and have apples for our meal. We don't live in that world, so it's a necessary part. If you're going to make change, you need to make sure that, you have a collective that's able to support that change as well. And I just want to say one thing about efficiency. The irony of efficiency is we do think that capitalism is always looking to be efficient, but in fact, go back to nature, because show me one capitalist system that can use the same 1 liter of water for 5 billion years and still give it back to you. And it's gone through sewage, it's gone through rain, it's gone through the streets, it's gone through swimming pools, chlorine, ocean, salt, everything. And yet it comes back to us in a purified way and we get to drink it again.
Oh my gosh,
who has that kind of efficiency? Who? Show me one system that is this efficient. 5 billion years of water going through dinosaur pee and everything else. Yet it comes to us pure and we drink it pure and we have zero respect for it. Because what do? We throw our trash and our chemicals into those rivers.
It's that regenerative ability. You're right.
An efficient regenerative ability, because we don't have anything as efficient as the planet. Nothing works as efficient as it. It's got zero carbon. You can't even measure. You can't even talk about it. When I speak with people and I say, show me the negative impact of the planet just functioning on its own without our manipulation, without our destructive behavior. Show me the planet's destruction. And, they're just thinking of saying something and there's nothing to say because there isn't. It's zero. It's perfect.
I'm so glad you brought that up.
When we align to nature, that's when we become perfect. And I learned these things not from science. I actually learned them from my indigenous friends, to be very honest, because in my upbringings and in my Catholic and Muslim and these religions and studying religion and a lot of my Jewish friends, though you will see those ideas of being eco-friendly and all those things in the original texts and all of that, you don't see it in society today. The Catholic Church is not about restoring the planet or caring for those things. They'll build another church if they could, so it's not like that. Whereas you go to certain communities and I see my friend, planting in a certain way. And I say, well, why are you doing this like this? Like, you just put the seed and it's like, no, I have 1,000 years of heritage that tells me this is how I see it because, and then they'll give you this whole spiel. And you're like, whoa. And there are scientists today using those methodologies for regenerative techniques that they call science today, whereas you can find the indigenous communities using them 400 years ago. You know? And so I kind of feel like there are people who have tapped into that wisdom of the efficiency of the planet, and they've become humble because they kind of recognize and like, wow, you're so great. Whereas other people came and are like, never mind you. I'm going to take your oil. I'm going to build a 100-tower building here, and I'm going to do that. I'm going to make a lot of money. You're nothing. You're worthless. You're just land. You're for ownership. I have a legal right to you. I bought this plot. These 2 acres are mine. That's the mentality. So if we're thinking of efficiency, please go out, have a walk, look at trees around you, and learn efficiency and appreciate how efficient nature is.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought that up. I do love that. It's been, And that's what's fun about every time we connect is inspiring each other and bringing new ideas to each other. And I'm so grateful for the fact that our paths crossed and that we reached out, that we support each other. And it's wonderful to connect with you.
Let's replicate this over and over and over again with more people and grow the collective so that, this can really turn into what we're both dreaming and imagining.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, thank you very much, Amber Byers, for sharing all your thoughts on Compassiviste Dialogues and Friend Who Walks with Spirits. I love your inspiring perspectives on community, inclusivity, diversity, and purpose. These are all really the backbones of how we can restructure and be one with nature and really become that efficient, harmonious unit with the planet. So to our audience, please subscribe and share this episode so that I can bring more amazing talks with Amber and like-minded people for everyone to listen to and share. Follow us on our social media. All the links to Tadpole Press and Amber Byers, along with Compassiviste Publishing and Compassiviste, are all listed below. So please do click on Tadpole Press. You'll find some exciting things. And Amber, I'm going to say this again, has a beautiful story. I'm not going to give away any of it, but it's a beautiful story about a little girl and a pet. And it's a lot deeper than that. Make sure you go and read that story because that's one of my favorite stories that I've read this year. We're here. It is really. I'm not embellishing that. I've kind of, spoke about that story for maybe almost a lot of the places that I talk about things that have to do with what you were bringing up in the book. I mentioned that, and I think it's very powerful. So I appreciate that you wrote that book, and I think it's very meaningful. And its day will come as well because it's a good book. So thank you for writing that.
Thank you so much, Ali.
We're here to help change the world together. I'm Ali Horiat. Thank you very much.